Great to see you here again. My name is Luc de Custer, founder of the Custer Academy. And in this video, I will define the procurement process. What are the different process steps that we have to include when we are doing procurement? But before we continue, don't forget to click on the subscribe button, click on the bell button, and every time we have a new video, YouTube will inform you about it. Let's have a look at the stages of a procurement process. When we do procurement, we go through different steps or stages. The first thing is we have to recognize the needs. What do we want to procure? That's the main reason why we do a procurement, because we have some needs that we cannot fulfill at this moment. So we have to buy some products or hire a service. Then we have to send out a purchase requisition to the people who can provide us that product or that service, so the people or the companies that can in fact recognize or fulfill our needs. There will be a review of the request. We have to go through some review to be sure that everything is okay. There has to be a budgetary approval because it will need some money to pay for the service once the service is delivered. So we need to have an approval. And companies have budgets, and in the project also you have certain budgets, and that budget approval relates to the budget that is still available for your project. You have a budget is approved, so we can go to the next step. So we look for quotation requests. If we have more than one supplier, we have more companies who can provide the service or the product, then we have an quotation request. We send a request to these different companies to give us a price for which they can provide the service or the product. We can, based on that, start a negotiation and create a contract. It depends a little bit on the rules. When you have public tenders or private tenders, things may be a little bit different. When you have a company, you have more freedom. When you have a public tender, you have to follow the official rules of tendering. Once you have the contract and the goods or the contract is completed, you receive the goods or the services. You receive the raw materials, for example. You receive the telephone line that you ordered. And then you have to do the three-way matching. We will talk about that also, because we have to verify that what we received complies with what we requested. On an invoice or an order, you may have a reference number, and also there is a description of what you are expecting to receive. Finally, when everything is okay, you have an invoice approval and you can conduct the payment. And finally, you do record keeping of all the elements that you have. You need that information. Why? If you buy telephone lines, you have to know what the references are. People in the project, they have to store that information. When we were buying or renting telephone lines at AT&T, those references had to be stored in the record so that in case there was a problem, the help desk could find the references and could contact the provider to resolve the problem. Now let's have a look at these different elements a little bit more in detail. First of all, we look at the needs recognition. We have to understand what needs that have to be or must be fulfilled. We have to create a business plan, or here we have to create a sketch and create an accurate plan for procuring goods and services in a timely manner and at a reasonable price. So we have to get these things provided on time, and we should not overpay. It's very important to see that the cost of what we want to have is acceptable, and it's a part of the financial evaluation of the project. Now, what you have to do is, when you look at the needs recognition, it's not just saying we need a telephone line, but it's also saying what products, telephone lines, routers, or services that we need, products or services that we need. But Also what characteristics they have. You can order a telephone line or a data line with 1 megabit per second, 2 megabits, 1 gigabit per second, things like that. You have to really define what you need. There can be a very specific technical description of it. The goods also should be adjusted to the quality requirements. You have to have the goods that comply with the quality requirements. When they have too high quality, it's also not good. It could be too expensive. Of course, if you can have the higher quality for the same price, why not? But you have to be careful here. If you look at, for example, defining what you need, I still have that example, I spoke about it before. When a company wanted to buy cheaper raw materials, they didn't specify all the needs in the proper way. They didn't look at all the things they needed, and they missed out certain things. So basically, when the goods were supplied, they were not compliant with what the company needed. So something started to go wrong in the needs recognition in the procurement process. Then we have a purchase requisition. Here we have a written or electronic document by the user or by the customer. So we send that purchase requisition to the supplier or the possible suppliers, and it contains all the necessary information of the products or services. It can be very technical when you have telephone lines, when you have products, all the parameters that are important for your processes, for the optimal application or use of the products or the services have to be written here. Now, here you will, in fact, use this document to create what we call the statement of work. And the statement of work describes all the products, all the elements that we need, including their characteristics. And that's a very important document because this will be the document that the supplier will use to make an offer. When you have a good purchase requisition, you guarantee that you have products that are compliant with the quality standards that you want, and that the products can be accepted for their purpose. Of course, there is a review of the request. We have to, let's say, review that request, and it has to be approved. And once the request has been approved, the actual procurement can start. Now, we will have to cross-check for budget availability. Do we still have budget to buy these things? Is it possible? Yes, no. I had cases where the budget was not available and we had to wait till the new budget was available for the next month or the next 3 months. Now, everybody will have to review this. We have to verify if everything is compliant, and all the people who are in fact involved have to verify the quality. Let's say that there is, first of all, that there is an actual need to purchase the goods and that the budget is available. It's not only we have an approval, no, do we really need the goods and do we have the budget? Once we have an approved purchase request, it becomes a purchase order, and then we continue in the procurement process. And the purchase order has in fact what we call the statement of work, which contains all the elements. So the purchase order contains the statement of work, and the supplier will provide a price for all the different elements. When there is a request that is rejected, it will be sent back to the reinitiator with the reason of the rejection. Then we have the solicitation process. We have the steps. Here we have the budget approval and quotation requests. Whenever a requisition is approved and the purchase order has been generated, the procurement team will create a corresponding solicitation process. Now we are going to really send the documents to the suppliers. The scope of the solicitation plan is, of course, dependent on the complexity of the requirements that we have. So we have to see how complex is it, what are the additional elements that we need. After providing the budget request, we send a request for quotation, and we get here expectations of the cost, and also we have a short list of vendors. So with the RFQ, we will talk about RFI, RFQ, and RFP later. The RFQ gives us an idea about the cost, what will the request cost. And it also provides us a list of vendors that we can use later. We can make a selection here, and with the selected vendors, we will continue the process. We will go to the next steps of the purchasing process. Evaluation, negotiation, and a contract. We have to, have an evaluation committee. The evaluation committee can be one person when it is a very simple project, but I had cases where we were tendering for large buildings. At that moment, we had an evaluation committee with different people to evaluate the different offers that we received and write a report and make an evaluation. So basically, once we have all these offers, we can review the quotations and write a report what we think would be the best solution to select. The process is to ensure that the best vendor will be selected, and then we continue with the procurement process. So we did that in evaluation. Now we can go to the negotiation and signing a contract. It may be possible that we find out that some elements would be different, and we can start negotiating with the supplier that we selected to improve the possibilities. Just imagine we assumed we had a solution, and we find a supplier who says, well, we basically have a better solution. So you can find a better solution, do a negotiation because it's with that contractor, and finally send the contract and the purchase order out once the contract is signed. And the contract has to be signed by both parties, by supplier and customer. Once the vendor acknowledges the purchase order, the contract is legally binding. Now, there can be a general contract where we have an agreement to do business with a company, and we may have different purchase orders that are in fact part of that general contract. For example, we had contracts with data line providers, telecom providers, and every time when we had a new telephone line that we wanted to order, we send in a request. We got the information from the different suppliers that we could use. We could select the best one, or the best one, not only price, but also solution, and then create a purchase order. From that moment on, once the purchase order was acknowledged by the vendor, the contract was in fact legally binding. Order management. Once the contract has been legalized, the vendor has to provide the goods and or services as described in the purchase order. So this is a legally binding contract, and we have to verify that these products or services, that they comply with the conditions of the statement of work. It's not only about the quantity. Okay, if we order one telephone line, it's just only one telephone line. But if we order like a ton of materials, we have to verify the quantity, but also the technical and quality specifications. We can do some testing, some sampling on the delivery, and then we have to see, is it correct or not? And if there is a problem, we have to react to that immediately. The company that I spoke about before, they ordered from a new supplier the new product, the new raw materials, but they didn't verify anything. It was just waiting there to start to be used in the production. And once they were used in the production, they found out that there was a problem. So that's basically too late because they formally accepted the products without doing a thorough evaluation. They should have used them in the production. They should have tried to make the different parts that would be made using these raw materials to verify if those raw materials are in fact compliant, yes or no. They made a very big error there, but okay. Now, what we have to do is the three-way matching between the goods received note, we call it the GRN. These are the goods that we received, the supplier invoice, and the purchase order. So basically here we have the verification with all the parameters together to be sure that everything has been accepted, everything has been delivered as we ordered it. If there are some, let's say, problems, we can have some disputes. Now, once the three-way matching has been approved, the goods or services are accepted. In case there is a problem, we have to open a dispute and find solutions. For example, when you receive goods and you do the sampling, you have a sampling and you have to see, okay, we accept the sample, yes or no. If the sample is rejected, you have different procedures that you should have to continue with the sampling. For example, you can take a second sample, and if that second sample is, for example, the first sample was bad, the second sample was good, you can take a third sample, and based on the third sample, you will say, well, we accept or we don't accept. And basically, in the worst case, you would be sampling everything. Of course, all these things in that case are done on cost of the supplier, and it could be very, very expensive. Now, once all the issues have been resolved, then we can say that the three-way matching is completed, the order will be closed, and the invoice will be paid. And the last step is about record keeping. We keep all these elements in our storage. We keep all the elements for future record, and we look at all those purchase orders. We review the quality of the supplier. All these things are very important for the procurement process. And we have a certified provider or a supplier. Once there are some issues or too many issues, we may have to review the cooperation between the supplier and us. So basically, when you look at certain companies, they would say, when you don't comply, we kick you out, we find a new one. But it's also quite expensive. For example, when you look at companies like Toyota, Toyota is doing this in a different way. When a supplier is not conform or the quality is not as expected, Toyota will help the supplier to improve, to get the products at the quality level that Toyota wants to have. Now, their idea is that they want to have a long-term customer relationship. They want to have a long-term relationship with their suppliers because for them, it's a competitive advantage to cooperate closely with the supplier. If the supplier can produce products which are cheaper and higher of quality, it is an advantage for Toyota because their costs will also be lower. Basically, they're looking for a win-win situation. So that was it for this video about the procurement process and the different process steps. Don't forget to click on the subscribe button, click on the bell button, and every time we have a new video, YouTube will inform you about it. Thank you very much, and I'm looking forward to seeing you in our next video. Bye bye.